Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the somewhat challenging topic of money and spiritual people. So, many spiritual people really struggle with money. I know that I was one of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if you are also one of them. And what do I mean by struggle with money? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not rich or have lots of money. It might just mean that you feel it's kind of at odds with your spiritual nature to want to accumulate money and desire money because that's kind of a form of material good, and you are a spiritual person of the spirit, not of matter and material. And yeah, how do we reconcile this and how do we solve this? Because ultimately, a part of you does want to be wealthy, and there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. So, this video will hopefully reconcile this for you and help you to be exceedingly rich and also happy and spiritual with that money. So, let's get going then. First of all, I'm going to switch you over to a beautiful, hopefully, presentation that I've created, or maybe it's just terrible, but you can be the judge. Um, in any case, this initial picture is supposed to depict the fact that many of us as spiritual people, when we think of money, we have many connotations, as everyone does with money. And one of those might be just the corporate world, the business world, and associated with that, we might think of greed and generally negative emotions. And indeed, we might also just have these emotions around money, which can be quite negative. Um, the desire to want more, clinging on to the material world. But the key concept that can hopefully save us from this is that money, like all things in the spiritual sense of the world, is energy. Everything is energy, or in some doctrines they call it mind, in other doctrines they call it God. But there is a universal oneness that connects everything, a la Walter Russell, if you read his book, Universal One. So, money being energy, I find, really helps me to come to terms with the desire to want to accumulate this energy. Because with this energy, we can we can transform it into our creations. And those creations can be very purposeful, meaningful, beautiful, and artful manifestations that can bring happiness, joy, and good things to our lives. So, money is energy, and just like you want to be healthy and accumulate energy, in that sense, you want to be a person full of health and energy. Similarly, you also can see the accumulation of energetic money in this way because you also want to accumulate energy in the sense of money because they're one and the same, right? So if you eat healthy, why not also accumulate money? Because they're both ways to uh, have lots of energy. So this is really what we want to do. We want to live a life full of energy. We want to imbue our form with life. And when we view things in that way, the question then becomes, well, once we have all this energy, what do we want to attract with this energy? What do we want to do with this energy? Because as per universal law, nothing stays still. Everything is in vibration. There's a rhythm to life. So, if we just accumulate this energy and do nothing with it, perhaps we're not in accordance with the laws of the universe. So the question really is, with this energy, what shall we do with it? And again, I'm giving you different visualizations or metaphors for money. So here we've accumulated, in this case, different spices, but really it's just a pile of things that we've accumulated, because all things are the same, all things are energy. So if we have accumulated this pile of energy, we can create beautiful things. And I like this analogy of the spices, because with this energy of different ingredients, or these different energies, we can create a recipe for some other manifestation or creation that we want to make. So think of it as accumulating ingredients, and with that you're going to create a beautiful recipe or outcome. And by abstracting the word money away from this fundamental source energy that we are gathering, we can see it in a different light, because now we can think of what can we create with this amazing energy. And so the question really is, what do you want to attract? And an interesting idea, well, let's think about why we sometimes have lots of money and why we sometimes don't. Apart from the fact that life is rhythmic in that sense. So when we have lots of money, we have lots of possibilities and lots of ways to attract new things into our life, ultimately new energies. Maybe we can buy holidays, maybe we can meet new people through new experiences, acquire new hobbies that cost money. And so you can think of having lots of money as having many paintbrushes to create many different types of things and attract many new things into our life. On the contrary, sometimes we don't have lots of money, and rather than being happy or sad when we have lots of money versus when we don't, it's interesting to think of money much like health, as an energetic tool that can teach us something. So why is it that we have not that much money at this point in our lives? There could be many reasons. One particular spiritual reason in connection to this current discussion is that maybe it's not the right time for us to attract lots of new things into our life. Maybe it's time for us to focus down on one particular thing, or make the most of what we currently have, because ultimately you have to want what you have before you can have what you want. So use the fluctuation of money as a teacher, as a lesson to guide your life, and using these external, which are ultimately internal because everything is internal, influences and signals to guide our life is a great way to flow with life, to flow like the water, as they say in the Tao Te Ching. And in doing so, you become in harmony with your life and nature around you. So next time you find yourself with less money, just consider the opportunity that that's giving you now to focus on less things, and therefore imbue that form with more life. Because when you focus on less, you can fill it with more life. And in doing so, you ultimately create more once again, which then creates more energy and ultimately more money. So that's the cycle of life. And as we just noticed, you can create something beautiful with a focus and with ultimately less money. So it's just a different way of being. It's a different balance of energies. But certainly if you reduce the form in which you're imbuing life and creation, you will ultimately end up expanding the form, which sounds counterintuitive, but think of it this way. If you have a very small glass, you only need to fill it with a very small amount of water. And the amount of life you have, the amount of water, will overflow that glass. And in turn, you will need a larger glass. In this case, the water is life, and the glass is the form being money. That might not make much sense, but stay with me because I will explain it from a book which I very much respect. So this book is called Through the Curtain by Shafika Karagula and Viola Petit-Neal, two absolutely amazing authors of the 20th century. And at the end of their book, they talk about this concept of the life behind the form, and in particular in relation to money. Well, not money actually, but the material world. So let's just read this. The imposition of a higher frequency upon the material world can move and change it and command it. Woman or man was not supposed to be the servant of the material world. She or he was supposed to command it. So this is really interesting. I think most spiritual people will identify with the fact that we were not supposed to be the servants of the material world. But many of you may not fully understand the fact that we were supposed to command it. And that's really amazing, because when we are in control of these forces of nature, because money is energy and energy is nature, then we can command it. And that is true mastery. So think of yourself as a life form imposing a higher frequency upon the material world, the money world, to be able to command it. And what are you commanding it for? Not more materials, but back to the life principle, to create more life, more energy, more happiness and goodness. The book goes on to say, when he or she seeks to possess it, so possess the material world, she or he becomes a servant of it. But the material world is supposed to be her or his servant. So it's not about possession, it's about being in control of the flow of life that flows through the material world, and remolding this energy into creations that are not materialistic, but that celebrate life. And when you have those creations, they can very well have big material components. For example, you could buy a red Ferrari because it brings you and other people tremendous amounts of joy. And the joy is the life principle from that creation. And that's fine. That's completely fine. So just think about what you spend your money on. Let's take, for example, drinking alcohol, which is a whole topic in itself. But that has both a life and a matter principle. The matter principle is that the alcohol is bad for you. It reduces your health, your mental and physical capacity. But the life principle might be that it makes you happier. If you're drinking with friends, it could be a fun, joyful experience. So the more we push towards the life principle, the more we're using money to celebrate life and spirituality and spirit, and the more we can justify ourselves accumulating massive amounts of wealth and money, because everything we're creating is ultimately energy of the highest form. And so this book then says to be aware of the life behind the form will help woman or man to control the form. It's as simple as that. This concept of the life behind the form is arguably the most important concept in all of spirituality. That's a huge statement. And by its nature, it certainly cannot be true. But I'm just trying to implore upon you the importance of this concept. And it's a very difficult concept to understand, so you won't fully understand it to begin with, but I will make more videos on this. And if you attend my meditation classes on Fridays in London, then I talk a lot about this concept. But interestingly, the book goes into further detail, which I think can be really helpful for listeners of this video. I didn't want to write it all out just because of time, but this is actually the most important part. So I'll just read it out. So the disciple meaning any spiritual explorer, can command the world of form because she or he knows clearly in their consciousness and is aware of the life behind the form. This is why disciples on the path often have a problem about material things. So that's us, right? We have this problem about material goods and possessions. They are in a kind of no man's land. Again, no woman, no man. I'm not referencing Bob Marley there. The disciple gets up and departs from the world of material domination. She or he sets out upon the journey from form to life. So as spiritual people, we try to journey from the material world to the spiritual world, from the human body to the soul, from form to life. And that's precisely why we find money difficult, because we're trying to move away from money in the sense of the material world. Anyway, going back to the book. So she or he sets out on the journey from form to life, from the land of the form of material things like the prodigal son or daughter, who lives in the country where he eats the husks which the swine eat, and the prodigal daughter or son says, I want to arise and go to my father. As you can see, I'm really trying hard to use both male and female pronouns, but if you'll just let me follow the book, which is in the male pronoun because it's an older book, for now, I'll carry on. So the prodigal son is mankind having departed from the father's house and into the world of form. And when at last he says, I will arise and go to my father, he is saying, in effect, I will arise and go forth on the journey from the domination of substance and material things to the reality of the life or spirit. And on the way, as he departs from the country of material domination and has not yet arrived at the realization of life or spirit, he goes into a kind of no man's land where there is a lack. He is at that kind of neutral point. The disciple often needs to go forward on his journey to an understanding of the life behind the form. And in doing so, he will discover that he has not only gained the life, but also the command of the form. And he will be able to use the form world or the material world wisely and well, because he can command it. So that's amazing. Just to explain that very briefly, as we as spiritual people try to move away from the material world, the form world, to spirit, we become disenfranchised, disillusioned with the material world and money. But that's because we haven't completed our journey yet, our development, our evolution. We haven't got to the stage yet where we have understood that once we reach the life, the spirit principle, we can use the spirit principle to command the form. And not only that, but they're actually completely interlinked because they're two poles of the same line or dimension. And in fact, the book goes on to say that form and life creatively interplay to manifest the world around us. So they're very much interlinked. You can't have one without the other. And so as spiritual people, we shouldn't shy away from the form. All we need to do is to learn more about life spirit, God, obtain a command over this life principle, and in doing so, we will be able to create any forms that we want, any outcomes, manifestations, and materials that we want, with an unlimited amount of money, which is ultimately energy. So these are just some images showing the life imbuing this plant. So the life imbuing the form. And in this case, the form is lifeless. I will explain more about this in subsequent videos. And this is life flowing through different forms. And once again, the life principle flowing through the form. But I will explain more of this in future videos because it's probably too much for now. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you go on to make wonderful creations with unlimited amounts of money and ultimately energy. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I will answer any comments below this video. Cheers.